It's an idea that's been around since Sir Thomas More wrote Utopia in 1516 and was advocated by the Welsh philosopher Bertrand Russell, who argued for an income sufficient for necessaries for everyone. There are those who argue that its early adoption is urgently needed, and among them is the Welsh Labour MP Kevin Brennan, who's tabled an early day motion in Westminster calling on the government to introduce a temporary universal basic income. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
How would that work?
Well, there's the general idea of universal basic income obviously is the idea that everybody would be provided, hence the universal title of it. But my motion was specifically in relation to those people who have been earning their living as freelancers, as self-employed people whose income has completely disappeared as a result of the coronavirus crisis. And so the idea would be that the government would quite simply provide them with an income that would be sufficient for them to cover their needs in the meantime. Of course, things have moved on a bit since I laid that motion down after the Chancellor's announcement this week, but not for those who are self-employed or freelancers who've been, left to rely on universal credit, the benefit, which will not be sufficient to look after their interests for people who've lost all their work, just as some employed people have done and are threatened with for the same reason, because of the misfortune of the coronavirus. So something is needed, whether it's a universal basic income for those people or a measure which would give them a percentage of their previously declared income to get them through this crisis.
Let me give an example, because it's someone I was talking to earlier this week on Radio Cymru, as it happens, of the sort of thing that was happening. It was a television director who was due to be filming a scene last Monday which had 30 extras sitting in a pub, and she was telling me, everyone there was expecting to be paid, not just the actors, but the cameraman, the lighting people, the director, and none of them will get a penny for that day. And these are people, people think of the media as being flush with money and being lovies and all of that, but these are people who have pretty small incomes and who are facing real difficulty right now.
Yeah, I think this current crisis, and obviously principally we want to keep people safe, but it has shone a light on something in our economy. 5 million people across the UK who are self-employed and who are freelancers, most of whom aren't amongst the very wealthy or the highest earners. But there's a variety right across the economy of people who are affected by this. And I think lots of people don't realise it. I've been campaigning for a long time for the rights of freelancers, over things, for example, like shared parental leave when they have children and so on, rights which are available to employed people. And you are right. Pretty much everything we see on television and lots of things we hear on the radio, just as an example, are produced for us by people who fall into this category, and we wouldn't have any of that at all if it wasn't for the fact that they were working in this way. And their work, which is, always uncertain, but often, reasonably steady over a period of time and which earns them a living, has been completely wiped out overnight. And I think understanding that is really important. It's very, very important that the Chancellor comes back early next week with a proposal that covers this.
What shape could that proposal take? Because we heard David C.C. Davis earlier, saying, look, we know this is a problem. We want to help these people, but it's not as simple to help them as it is to help people who are employed, where we can say we'll pick up 80% of the wage.
Well, there are various proposals. One is that you look at, because it's available to HMRC, the previous earnings of people who are self-employed and freelancers, and that you, as they've done with people who are employed, you then award a payment which is equivalent to something like 80% in the case of employed of their previous earnings. And if people are not easy to track because they're relatively new as freelancers and self-employed, there could be a de minimis payment, a minimum payment, if you like, that would be made available to people. But what's quite clear really is that there's an inequity here. People have lost all their work for the same reason, whether they're employed or self-employed. But you could be an employed person, and under the scheme the Chancellor announced last week, you would get 80% of your previous income up to, I think, a maximum of as high as £32,000. But you could be someone earning the same income as that employed people over the last 3 years or so, have some savings because you're self-employed and you need to keep some savings to pay your tax and to save for your pension and so on in a way that you might not have to when you're on the PAYE scheme. And you might be on the same earnings and actually be entitled to nothing because universal credit is not that easy to access despite the changes announced by the government. It's paid per household. And it has a savings threshold. So there's a good reason why the government should come up quickly with a scheme, and it does have the mechanisms available through Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs to come up with something.
Kevin Brennan, thank you. Kevin Brennan is the Labour MP for Cardiff West.